anybody there?
Good morning, and welcome to the First Unitarian Church. I'm sure you realize this, but sometimes we need to step back and take note that we are actually, all of us, living through an extraordinary historic period of American history, namely going through an impeachment process and the severe test of the separation of powers as imagined by the writers of our Constitution. As a result, with all this stuff going on, most of us are tied to the media in a crazy-making manner, paralyzing many of us to the point where we really can't seem to do much of anything else. And so, to all of you, a reminder from the poet William Carlos Williams. He said, "It's difficult to get the news from poems, yet we die miserably every day for lack of what is found there." And so for those of us who live on a diet of information with but smatterings of inspiration, be advised that brings on a certain malnutrition. Not good for you. Our spiritual system needs both news and poetry, data and uplift. And I believe that for every news program, our hearts yearn for music. And along with scouring international events, we need moments of quiet reflection. And if you must read the business news, don't forget to turn to the comics as well. This may put you in a better mood this Christmas season when poetry abounds. Symbol of light and of knowledge, symbol of warmth and freedom. We light this chalice as a symbol of our faith. Here we gather to celebrate hope and the infinite possibilities of love. May we open our service turning our hymn books, please, to number 38. Before our meditation this morning, which is really our way to take a moment to pause amidst life's frenzy, getting off that treadmill, even if just for a moment. So in this meditation this morning, I want to focus on a word I think most of us seldom use: perspicacity. The word was used rather casually by the Nobel laureate in literature, André Gide, when he said, "I intend to bring you strength, joy, courage, perspicacity, and defiance." Well, all these qualities are important, but somehow perspicacity stands out. And yet it is truly an appropriate gift to receive and offer during the holiday season. Perspicacity means kind of an acute mental vision or discernment. It refers to being quite savvy or keen. The perspicacious individual is one who literally sees things through to the heart of what really matters. And such people see through the tinsel, the commercialism, the hoopla, see through them to get directly to the heart of the season, the delivery of generous and genuine love. The heart of the holidays implores us to see beneath the surface of things to the underlying spiritual sentiment, to see beyond the literal to the poetic, beyond the doubting mind to embracing that for which our hearts truly yearn. So bring perspicacity to the holiday season. Dare to connect with the true meaning. Amen. Actually, before we get right to the reading, I want to tell you that I'm reminded of an old colleague of mine. This goes back many, many years, who was serving the Unitarian Universalist Church in Princeton, New Jersey. And he had a great idea, something that just about every minister has thought of, but very few, if any, has ever dared to do. And his thinking was that, my goodness, we spend all this time crafting a sermon, working out the this and the that's, and then after we deliver it, it's done, over, gone. All that work and effort, I mean, it's wasted. So why not on occasion repeat a really good sermon that you had? And so, you know, his colleagues go, yeah, go for it. And so in the newsletter, when they announced that the topic, the name of the sermon, there was a little R next to the title of the sermon, kind of as a footnote on the bottom. It said the R stands for repeat, that this sermon had been delivered such and such a date. Well, the minister, I mean, Unitarian Universalists can be a hard bunch. They asked him to leave. They asked him to leave, and all of his colleagues kind of took that to heart. We thought, oh, okay, a good idea. It was a very good idea, but maybe in practice it's something different. Now, I say this because I'm reminded of this because the reading is one that I have used before, and I throw myself upon the mercy of the congregation. I think it's a good one. It's a poem written back in the 50s. It's written by Diane de Prima, and for me, it's really hard to think about or reflect upon issues such as peace and war and strife and all that without thinking about how the threat of war always hangs heavy around us, regardless of in what era we find ourselves. And so this poem, written in the 1950s, is haunting in that I'm almost, frightened to say it's still so relevant for us today. 50s, here we are, 2019. How little has changed. And the name of this poem is called Memories of Childhood. So I said to him, hey, mister, what you going to do with that H-bomb? How come you waving it around like that? You going to drop it on that building? Hey, mister, how come you're taller than that there building? Is it a optical delusionment? And he says to me, go home, boy. Don't bother me. I'm telling you, you make me nervous. Go home, or I might get nervous and drop this thing. So I went home. So my mother was in the kitchen, and I ran in, and I said to her, hey, Ma, there's a big, tall man outside. Boy, is he really big and tall. He's taller than our house, and he's got this bomb in his hand. I think he's going to drop this H-bomb on our house. Hey, Ma, I don't want him to drop it on our house. So my mother went to the window, and I went with her, and I saw his leg standing there, and I said, there. You see, Ma? That's his leg standing there. You see him, huh? And she said, what are you talking about, boy? There's nothing out there but the tree. So I waited till my father came home, and by then it was dark. And I said, Pa, I want to show you something. And he said, all right, my boy, what is it? And he put his briefcase down on the table. And I said, did you notice anything funny when you came into the house tonight? And he said, well, yes, you didn't put your bike away. And I said, no, that's not what I mean. So I took him to the window and I said, Pa, do you see a man standing out there, a big, tall man? I can just see his two legs. Can you? And he said, well, I do seem to see something out there. Yes, my boy, I do. And I said, good, I'm glad you see it, Pa, because that man standing there is holding a bomb over our house, an H-bomb, I think, Pa, and I want you to make him go away. And he said, no, wait a minute, boy. I think that's just the outline of the tree. Yes, that's what it is. It's getting dark out, and it had me fooled for a minute. But there's no such thing as an H-bomb, you know, son, and there's no man out there. So we had supper, and after supper I went to my grandfather's room to talk to him, and I said, Grandpa, what happens if an H-bomb falls? And he said, a what, Sonny? And I said, an H-bomb, Grandpa. You know, like an atomic bomb, only bigger. What happens if it falls? And he said, it'll never happen, Sonny. And I said, why not, Grandpa? Why not? Don't you believe in H-bombs? I mean, don't you think there is such a thing? And he said, I believe in God, Sonny, and God will never let it happen. Now go play. So I went out to play, and I got Richard, and he said to me, hey, you know, there's a big tall man by the house, and he's holding this bomb, and my mother says he's not there. I said, you too? The same thing with me. What are we going to do? Well, we have to get it away from him, Richard said, before something happens. So we went up to the roof, and we took the clothesline and made lassos. And then Dick climbed the chimney, and he yelled, hi-oh, Silver! And he couldn't get to it, and then I tried, and I couldn't get it. And Ma started yelling for me to go to bed. Then Richard took out his pocket flashlight, and he shone it on the big face of the big tall man. And the man was sleeping. He's sleeping, Richard said to me. Do you think he'll drop it while he's asleep? And I said, I don't know. And then Richard's father came and walloped him good for not being in bed, and I went home and they smacked me, and I kept thinking he might drop it in his sleep, especially if he had bad dreams. And then I went to bed. Well, we have a few announcements this morning, but not too many. First, a warm welcome to anyone who is here for the first time, and just want to inform you that there is a lovely welcoming table right outside this door, and I hope you stop by and learn a little bit more about the church, and I'll try to get there as well, and we can make some introductions and learn a couple of things. Please take a look at all the announcements in the order of service. It might take you till Wednesday to get through them all, but there is an end point to it all. A couple of things. First of all, a reminder that tonight, a very special night, our Assistant Minister, Monica Dobbins, will hold a lecture. I think she'd probably prefer give a presentation on something very dear to her heart, and that is she's got slides. She's all set for a wonderful presentation on the Nativity. That's going to be at 6 o'clock tonight in Elliott Hall, so we can use the screen for some of the great slides or photos that she's going to share with everyone. So please make a note of that tonight at 6 o'clock. Also want you to realize that next Sunday already, my goodness, how time flies, we're going to have the Christmas pageant here. And so get your kids ready, and if you don't have kids or grown-up kids or whatever, be sure to be here because it's always a wild Christmas pageant at the First Unitarian Church. That's at the 11 o'clock service. At the 9 o'clock service, Monica and I are going to do something that we do on occasion, and it's always a lot of fun for both of us, hopefully for the congregation as well. We take the same theme and offer a short homily on the same theme, and this year it's going to be Leap of Faith. So come and listen to Leap of Faith at 9 o'clock, and then hang around for the pageant, which is a leap of faith, actually, when you think about it, and all's good. Also, the tickets for the solstice, a very important part, and the church calendar will be on sale in the coffee hour. Then I also want you to note that we are in the midst of a very important drive in this church, and that's the capital campaign. And rather than have me blither some more about the capital campaign, I'd like to, first of all, thank our co-chairs for the capital campaign, Alan Ainsworth and Colette Herrick, for leading the way. And they're going to just take a few minutes to fill us in on where we are in the campaign and hopefully invite those who have yet to sign up for the campaign to think really hard about doing that. So Alan and Colette, please come on up and enlighten us.
Morning, everyone. So as many of you may know, we launched the capital campaign in May of 2019. And the purpose of this campaign is the upkeep and preservation of this historic building. And as you can imagine, any historic building requires extra special love and preservation. And as we're working on those goals, the intention is to make this building safer, stronger, and greener. So Alan's going to give us an update on where we are with the capital campaign. Before that, I want to wholeheartedly thank the committee that has worked so hard to, have many of you seen this little brochure that was put together? And our capital campaign committee, Cheryl Johnson. Cheryl, will you stand up? Cheryl? Thank you, Cheryl. Been amazing. And Kim Grob and Peter Esko, Monica Dobbins, and Tom Goldsmith have been working very hard. And thank you all who have wholehearted thanks to all of you who have pledged, and we've already made a lot of progress. Alan's going to talk about that in just a thank you for your contributions.
I want to lend my thanks as well. I'll make this as brief as possible, but I want to make sure that I hit some particular points. As Colette said, this is a $500,000 campaign. It's stretched over 3 years. Many of you have made pledges, and you've probably set up a schedule with the administrative office. If there's a way that you can accelerate your pledge, it would be most helpful, and I'll tell you about why in just a second. But first of all, look out the windows. Many of us do that anyway as a rule of thumb. They look the same, but they've all been taken out and reworked, and then there's new insulation over them. So this room is a whole lot tighter than it was last year. Some of what we've done was done before winter hit, so that there was not a lack of exposure and so forth. So we've actually expended about $140,000 towards the campaign at present. We've only brought in about $120,000 of actual cash. $360,000 has been pledged. And only about 54% of regular attendees have made pledges. So there's lots of room. The rest of you kick in and we'll get to that $500,000 goal. This is a good time to be doing that. This is the end of the year. We're thinking about taxes. If you can roll over, if we're 70 and a half, for example, you can roll over an IRA, a Roth account, and you can pledge a piece of that, and it's tax deductible. So let's see if there's anything I forgot. We'll also have a table set up near the big screen outside. You can come by and chat with us, pick up a brochure, pick up a pledge card. You can walk into the administrative office and they can help you fill that out or figure out how to make the pledge. You can also send it in. You can also do it online. So I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. One of the side pleasures of the capital campaign is that I get to deal with contractors. Anybody enjoy working with contractors? They are their own breed. And so we had one here early in the week. We had a wonderful relationship with the Heritage Foundation, which did all the work on these windows. Everything was great except the very last little bit. And I called the contractor here and said, this needs to be painted and this needs to be fixed. And in true contractor fashion, he said, no, it's not part of the contract, and so on and so forth. But with me was my office mate, my 15-year-old black lab, who was not ferocious, but instead kind of meandered up to the contractor. And, you know, dogs can do these goo-goo eyes at people. You know, they're just dripping with love, and made sure that the contractor's attention was caught. And he said, oh, cute dog. And I said, yeah. How old is he? I told him. He said, oh, that's pretty old. I said, yeah. And then he told me about the losses of his dogs, and we got into dogs. And then he said, well, okay, we'll finish up the job tomorrow. And out he went. So, I can lend you my dog if you are in. At this time, the offering will gratefully be received, a chance to greet one another and bid each other a fine good morning. The Unitarian Church in which I was raised in Hollis, Queens, always had a Christmas fair in early December. I remember attending the fair each year with my mother, who, regardless how much she looked around and how many of the booths she visited, she limited her purchase to one Christmas ornament every season and bought it from the same woman. And the ornament was actually pretty much always the same, with just a few slight variations. The ornament strongly resembled an egg, but it was actually made from a very, very thin porcelain, which looked as though it were the shell of an egg perfectly formed. You'd think the yolk was still inside somehow. And on this delicate egg, the artist, named Ruth, painted a very simple, Christmassy kind of design. It could be a sprig of holly or freshly fallen snow on a tree branch. And then after the purchase, we'd have some spicy apple cider outside the church kitchen where most of the congregation huddled to socialize, and then we went home. Although I'm not one who likes to buck tradition, especially not if it's my mother's invention, I did summon the courage one season to ask her on our drive home, "Why do you always buy the same ornament from Ruth every single Christmas?" Oh, my mother sighed deeply, and she said, "To keep the peace." I had absolutely no idea what she was talking about until several years later I learned that there had been, several years prior, a huge and horrific blowout publicly in church between Ruth's husband, Bo, and my father. Now, some of you old-timers may remember my father, who would visit Salt Lake periodically in the late 80s and early 90s. I think he struck everyone as the epitome of calm and serene, never ruffled, and by looking at him, you'd never suspect he had a quarrel in his whole entire life. First of all, he stood 5 feet 4 inches tall, was bald, and weighed a robust 225 pounds. There's a blues song I swear was written just for him called "I'm Built for Comfort, Not for Speed." That was my dad. And his antagonist, Bo, Ruth's husband, was likewise a man you'd never expect could ever share a harsh word with anyone. Bo was very, very tall and easygoing. And before joining the Unitarian Church in Queens, he was a devoted Quaker. In fact, he looked like he was just shot from a cannon in the Quaker Oats box. Authentic Quaker through and through. And as a Quaker, Bo was a proud pacifist, which actually endeared him to my father. Now, my father, you need to understand, was not just left-leaning, but deeply rooted in leftist politics. He voted for Norman Thomas every chance he had and could make Bernie Sanders sound like a moderate. Pacifism resonated with my father's outlook, except for one nagging exception. Now, in a church discussion, probably following a sermon on pacifism or something related, Bo shared his background as a Quaker and his position as a conscientious objector for all wars. My father, who always hesitated to speak in public, rose to his feet and he said, "Bo, why surely you are not a conscientious objector during the Second World War." And Bo calmly answered that he did in fact object to all wars, and World War II was no exception. My father apparently lost it at that point, in public. He experienced too many deaths in the family during Hitler's reign of terror, which undoubtedly colored his qualified embrace of pacifism. After immigrating to the States in 1941, he was inducted into the army and went back to Germany in an effort to save the world from the brutality embedded in a pure race ideology. Well, apparently it was quite the scene in church, and my father and Bo never spoke to each other again. And efforts were made never to invite them both to the same party. And so my mother, God bless her, would visit the church's Christmas fair every year in order to exchange pleasantries with Ruth and buy an ornament in hopes that this kind gesture would keep the peace. And although Ruth never appeared again for a regular church service, the two women chatting and laughing together at the Christmas fair each year made an indelible impression upon me. And I figured out way back then at an early age that women were somehow, I don't know, smarter, more savvy, more perceptive than intractable men could ever hope to be. The fulcrum of the dispute between Bo and my father reflects the long history of arguments about the efficacy of absolute pacifism. There was a similar clash made famous through public exchanges between Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Buber. Now, for those of you not really up on your Martin Buber, he was a German Jewish theologian, although actually he was born in Vienna. His most famous book was I and Thou, published in 1923. For me, the book provides a perfect blend of progressive Jewish theology, Christian mysticism, and just a dash of Buddhist philosophy thrown in. Its premise, for anyone crazy enough who tries to put the book into some kind of a nutshell, but the premise is that there are two modes of engaging with the world, both in relationship form. One is a relationship which Buber calls I-it. The I-it relationship constitutes our usual manner of engaging with others, engaging even with our natural surroundings. And what happens in this relationship is that we consider the other a mere it. As an it, we treat the other, be it a person or a tree, as an object, and it, something that can be analyzed, scrutinized, classified, implying, of course, a separation then between oneself and the other. Honestly, we tend to treat people and the world around us as things. Things to be used, usually for one's own benefit. Another mode of engagement is called I-thou, a relationship where the other is not a mere object differentiated from me, but involves a far more delicate, almost intimate kind of relationship. For example, we can look through these windows and detect a tree, which I understand most people do anyway during the Sunday morning service. And so we look at the tree, or any tree, anything in nature, and we are, in all probability, going to regard it as an it. I'm here, the tree is there. It could be classified as, depending, an oak tree, a maple tree, an elm tree, but no authentic relationship exists between the tree and me. But it's also possible to engage with a tree to engage with another person in a different kind of relationship, what Buber would call an I-thou relationship, where the person or the tree acquires and here we get into this mystical sense, where the other acquires a universal quality of aliveness, divinity, and even something that potentially can transform you. It is through, and this is Buber's at the heart of his theology, it is through the I-thou relationship that we can find our way to God. Theology, then, is primarily all about dialogue. So with that said, Buber is headed for a collision with Gandhi over the issue of Zionism. Now, Buber never endorsed Zionism as a political force dedicated to a territorial goal, namely a Jewish homeland in Palestine. Instead, Buber cared more about a spiritual and cultural renaissance for Jews in which a settlement in Palestine could carry huge significance. He always kept Zionism kind of at arm's length until 1938, when he barely escaped the Holocaust and wound up teaching at a university in Jerusalem. The following year, 1939, Gandhi blasted Zionism, saying that it was an injustice to the Arabs of Palestine. And Buber, probably to a large extent, would agree with that. He said, yeah, I can see that point of view. I can understand that. But Gandhi then went completely off the rails, according to Buber, when Gandhi advised German Jews to stay in Germany and resist the Nazis through nonviolent action. Now, although Buber had always considered himself a pacifist, he responded to Gandhi. This is all public, you got to understand. These aren't private letters. This is all on the world stage. He responded to Gandhi with tremendous ferocity. At first, he kind of belittled Gandhi by claiming that Gandhi's pacifism, used in the struggle against the British Empire, he said, that was easy. Easy because the Brits, at least, could conceivably be brought to their senses. Nonviolence against Hitler was an utterly meaningless exercise that could never succeed when up against, in Buber's words, a diabolic universal steamroller. So Buber presented two key concepts. One, pacifism in some circumstances is merely wishful thinking, producing nothing but martyrs. And Buber also conceded that his own position on pacifism involved, a contradiction. But then he follows that up by saying, isn't that inherent among all pacifists? I mean, you need to be honest enough to see the limits of pacifism, regardless how repugnant the alternative. Now, there's no doubt that Buber would have perished in the Holocaust, and by immigrating to Palestine instead of practicing nonviolent resistance in Germany, he lived another 27 productive years. And we need to remember, this is so important, we need to remember that at least within Buber's own theological framework, the Holocaust represented the ultimate triumph of the it. The it. Nazism reduced human beings to mere things. Inside everyone's heart, we'll find an unwavering yearning for peace. And that yearning becomes more pronounced at this time of year, as the holidays at least try to make us stop long enough to hear the innate message of peace contained within all the holy scriptures of world religions. Jesus, known by many names, teacher, rabbi, counselor, savior, prince of peace. Now, Jesus was locked into pacifism as an unyielding ideology. But the question remains, is there not a difference between an ideology and an ideal? Something that cannot always be reached or fulfilled in our lives, but something that at least we strive for, kind of our North Star, giving us direction. At what point, then, do we allow our ideals to be compromised? And compromised under what circumstances? I mean, this is how civilization has always wrestled with the whole field of moral philosophy. You know, when, if ever, do moral principles become untenable? Now, we certainly have the capacity to hear what the Prince of Peace had spoken. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If someone strikes you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. Put your sword back into its place, for all who draw the sword will die by the sword. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Well, these revolutionary ideas for ushering peace into the world had a profound impact on the early Christians who took on this pacifist position of never resisting an evil person. Christian pacifism lasted until it's right there, documented historically. This pacifism lasted until the year 312, when the Roman Emperor Constantine converted to Christianity with the caveat of going to war against other nations in the name of Christ. It has that kind of perverse logic that Donald Trump is so famous for. You just can't figure that one out. But that's what he did. But then again, imagine if Constantine didn't pursue this ridiculous course of action to kill in the name of Christ. Can you imagine if he continued the pacifism and choosing love over war? We may have wound up with an entirely different world. I don't know. Nevertheless, the tradition of Christian pacifism was then carried out actually only by a few brave souls. What I consider to be the first conscientious objector came in the form of a guy named Martin of Tours, in the year 336, who was conscripted. He was a soldier. And then he declared at one point, I am a soldier of Christ. I cannot fight. And he was jailed for his action. Over time, pacifism became more of an individual choice rather than, an institutional position. St. Augustine, in the year 400, laid the foundation for what he termed the just war theory. A lot of ways of looking at the just war theory. For me, it's simply St. Augustine looking for loopholes in Jesus' teaching, arguing vehemently that a moral basis could be provided for going to war in certain circumstances. And then 800 years later, Thomas Aquinas codified all these principles that supported a just war. unconditional pacifism became a very rare philosophy. There were exceptions, like Ben Salmon, an American Catholic priest, an outspoken critic of the just war theory. According to him, all wars were unjust. And he refused to be inducted into the army in World War I. He was arrested in Camp Dodge, Iowa, and sentenced to death. This was later revised to 25 years of hard labor. And if you look into that, it's absolutely frightening how many of these conscientious objectors at that time died during that prescribed 25 years of hard labor, died before those 25 years were up. It's absolutely frightening to wrap your arms around it. Now, one of the leading pacifists during the Second World War, John Middleton Murray, wrote his famous book in 1937 called The Necessity of Pacifism. He argued that Nazi Germany should be allowed to retain control of mainland Europe since Nazism was a lesser evil compared to the horrors of a total war. But, this is just amazing. In light of the Holocaust, he changed his mind. He recanted his initial position, his initial views on pacifism. And so you got to wonder, did this public vitriol between Martin Buber and Gandhi somehow affect his decision-making, where he decided, no, the Holocaust was too overwhelming, that pacifism would not be justified in this case. So did that tension between Gandhi and Buber affect him? Who knows? My hunch is it probably did, because it was so public. During the civil rights era in our country, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who credited both Gandhi and Henry David Thoreau as his major influences, along with the pacifism taught by Jesus, Martin Luther King said, "To our most bitter opponents, we say, we will match your capacity to inflict suffering by our capacity to endure suffering. We shall meet your physical force with soul force," which is actually a term and strategy that was used by Gandhi. "Do to us what you will, and we shall continue to love you." Now, Martin Buber was, in fact, very supportive of Dr. King, but probably applied the same logic to King as he did to Gandhi. As long as there is a chance that the enemy could be shown the error of its ways by either shaming them or rallying public support. Now, in Dr. King's case, we've got Bill Connor being met, Bill Connor's oppression being met with nonviolence as the American public watched it all on their TV screens. So if there is a chance of this kind of public support rallying that, then pacifism can be overwhelmingly successful. But Buber would always insist that pacifism can never be absolute. In fact, it went so far, Gandhi told Buber, and I quote, that Jews could melt the Nazi heart through nonviolent action. Buber condemned that as just absurd. Pacifism is a mere illusion, he said. It's an illusion in the face of genocide. But pacifism is conceivably a pathway to peace. But then again, it's an ideal. It can only be regarded as an ideal which gets, on occasion, compromised by tragic circumstances wrought by the undeniable force of evil. And so we try to make our way, as humankind always has, we try to make our way through a tough and hostile world leavened by hope. And it's at this time of year that we hope our prayers for peace will be realized. And as we wind our way towards Christmas and stop long enough with the shopping and the hassles, we can take the time to listen to the prayers, to see the hope, and maybe it gets to the point where the hope is so vivid that we can not only see it, but we can feel it, we can touch it, we can taste it in the music, in the generosity of spirit, and in all the prayers that are said throughout the season. The teachings of Jesus inspire us, and they fuel us with hope. We'd like to imagine that such noble ideas are possible. And we marvel that these radical ideals were actually recorded a couple thousands of years ago. Indeed, blessed are the peacemakers. Yes, blessed are the peacemakers. And during the Christmas season, we long for the reminder of how the Prince of Peace challenged the old hateful ways in order to bring about a new world order. His message of a peaceable kingdom actually helps prevent us from becoming too cynical in a divided and hostile world. It's the season where we open ourselves to irrational belief and where we entertain the wild notion that everything is possible. Yes, even a world at peace. So let us hope and pray. Can we conclude our service? Turning our hymn books, please, to number 163. As we extinguish the chalice, let's close with the rather disarming words of Aldous Huxley. He said, "It's a bit embarrassing to have been concerned with the human problem all one's life and find at the end of one's life one has no more to offer than try to be a little kinder." Wow, yeah. So when you think of our lifetime of toil in the vineyards, you would think that at the end of the day we could arrive at something perhaps a little more profound. But maybe not. Perhaps the purpose of life then is nothing particularly fancy or complicated. It comes down to being kind, kinder, kindest. Hopefully, we learn this wisdom early on in our lives. Amen. So as we break for coffee and conversation, just a couple of quick reminders. The welcoming table, if you are new. The capital campaign table, if you want to discuss this a little bit further and talk to someone persuasive about how much perhaps you should consider pledging to the capital campaign. And then, of course, an opportunity to purchase the solstice tickets for the dinner. Thank you all very much.